Yeah,
start?
usually he does something where he'll say like he has a whole a thing where he reads that like this isn't therapy, this is uh he's got a script. He's got a script he usually reads.
So I apologize. I was not provided the script. Um, so something I will work on to make sure that people in my
I
position
can
always have the script.
so I'll just throw it out there. Basically, we are doing this to but we are what is it? I don't know that it is it safe or it's for entertainment purposes. But essentially you need to consult with your individual therapist and clinical professionals that you're working with in order to make sure you get what you need, that we are just commenting on recovery and mental health in general.
Well, it's to provide support and education.
That's it. It's more like that.
So we try to provide support and education, and we are not providing psychotherapy.
Correct.
And to keep things in the perspective of that, and to the
Correct.
extent that you need or want psychotherapy or help from a licensed professional, mental health professional, we encourage you very much to go and seek that help.
Absolutely. But we're going to have a good conversation around couples work and recovery, that sort of thing. So, and then I take it you don't have the thing to introduce me either. Is that correct?
I'm told Tammy at least normally allows you to introduce yourself. So I'm going to defer to Matt to introduce himself.
All right. So my name is Matt Wheeler. I am currently working as a psychotherapist at Family Strategies Counseling Center in Mesa, Arizona. Um, I I am a certified sex addiction therapist. I have also done a lot of training in emotionally focused couples therapy. I love attachment work. I love doing couples work, helping couples specifically in recovery, but also lots of different marital situations. So to me, it's a lot of fun to help people figure out how to have better human connection, better connections with their partners. Recovery provides a pretty interesting, difficult, painful experience to try and do attachment work, especially if we have competing attachments, such as addiction or whatever else. So it's was cool that I got this opportunity and to share with you guys. I can't remember if there's anything else to introduce myself, probably, but
Well, I'm also told that you often wear creative socks.
oh
So
my
I'm supposed
gosh.
to give you an opportunity, whether now or at some point
Well, it's
towards
gonna happen. Apparently,
the
it's
bottom of
happening
the next
now.
hour.
I'm not sure that the socks always make it onto the recordings. But at some point after all this introduction, then the recordings happen. But all right, I'm going to show you guys my fun socks for today. And these ones have a bit of an object lesson. So these socks, although it's maybe hard to see, they are sloths. You see the sloths? They're upside down because I don't know how else to show you guys my socks other than upside down. And the reason I wore my sloth socks today, besides the fact that I think they're awesome, um, I, uh, I actually think that it's a great exercise for us to learn that in order to do attachment work, we actually have to slow down. And so this is usually where I jump into kind of a little bit of a teaching piece. Do I have your go ahead, Stuart?
So to our attendees, I assume many of you or most of you are regulars and I am not. So thank you for allowing me to join your group here. Yes, I understand Matt will do 10 to 15 minutes or so of a discussion topic, a little psychoed, and introduce some themes. And then folks will have an opportunity to ask questions and Matt will try to respond. I'm told we're to use the Q&A function, which at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A function. If you just at any time type in your questions, I'll read them, and then at the appropriate time, Matt will respond.
Yep,
So
you
with
can.
that, off to Matt.
Cool. You can also put them in the chat too. We're not afraid to use the chat, but Q&A I think tends to work a little bit more from an organizational standpoint, a little better. But so I don't know if I have 10 to 15 minutes of content, but we're going to go there. I have been working, and I've talked to you guys about this before. One of the biggest barriers to human connection is toxic shame, and I think I've even talked about it recently. Maybe I haven't. I love understanding the difference between internal shame and external shame. Internal shame is the idea that I believe that I am bad, or I'm broken, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not going to measure up. External shame is the idea that I believe others believe that I am bad, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to measure up. And a lot of times in recovery, when I first get people into my office and I get them going in recovery, and maybe it's shortly after D-Day, because that's what's forcing them into discovery day. That's what's forcing them into therapy for finally. I have to work on a person's internal shame to believe that they are lovable. Oftentimes before I can even get them to be able to connect to another human being, such as their partner, such as their friends and family. Because if we don't believe that we're lovable, we have a hard time letting other people love us. Now, one thing I've noticed a lot in recovery is there gets to be a place where, and this I think applies not only to somebody struggling with addiction, but I think this applies to partners, betrayed partners as well. But we both need to learn to love ourselves, and that maybe our partner's actions are not a direct reflection of our lovability. Sometimes if our partner is struggling with addiction, we often think, well, it must be because I'm not good enough, or my hurt and pain was not enough to stop them from acting out, or like we have this idea that it has something to do with our lovability, which is totally understandable and a totally rational thought when we are in pain. But when we step out of it and look, somebody who's struggling with an addiction, or even if it's not an addiction, let's say it's even one instance of infidelity or whatever it might be, it is easy to look at ourselves and find the blame within ourselves. And that would be a case of where we have internal shame. Something's wrong with me. I'm broken. I'm not enough. And as we start into recovery and we gain a greater understanding of our lovability, that other people's behavior does not dictate my lovability, we start to get empowered. We start to get almost excited, like, oh man, I am lovable, and I'm not going to let anybody tell me I'm not lovable. And so we get this empowerment, and sometimes this unhealthy, like, resistance and defensiveness, that anytime somebody challenges us with shame, or what we believe to be shame, we shut it down. We shut it down with defensiveness. We're not open to empathy. And a lot of times what I've helped people to understand is that this can be external shame, because even though I believe I'm lovable, I still believe that my spouse thinks I am worthless, or thinks that I am a screw up. I still think that my spouse and everybody else, or a lot of other people, except my recovery buddies or whatever it is, they think I'm a failure. And so then I get all this defensiveness to try and shut down what I see as external shame, but it's actually still internal. It's this faulty core belief that other people around me believe this. So I have to start to own and be accountable that I'm struggling to believe that you or that other people believe I'm lovable. And as I start to own that, I'm able to be more open to receiving the idea or the affection or attention or nurture from somebody else that I have lovability. And so we can bring, if we are like a sloth and slow down, stop letting our emotions get so intense and into this story. And I tell people all the time, it's helpful to say the story I'm telling myself, the narrative I've been writing, the my understanding of what's happening, right? We own our story, our narrative, we own our perception. And we tell the other person, this is my perception, but we have to often ask, is this the message you are trying to send me? Is this the information you're meaning for me to hear? And if they say, no, I'm not telling you that you aren't trying hard enough in your recovery, I'm telling you I'm scared that you aren't working your recovery. And if you aren't working your recovery, I'm going to lose you. So I'm actually trying to say I'm scared that I'm going to lose you because you're missing something in your recovery. Well, that's their story, but I don't have to let that affect my external shame and get defensive. So then I start getting curious. I start slowing down and trying to understand more about what's going on with my spouse. Or anybody for that matter, my child, my friend. So this slowing down and understanding external shame and owning our story, really important for bringing down defensiveness so that we can connect as a couple or as other human beings. So I think that's all I got, Stuart. This is where you ask me fascinating questions until our participants start typing in their questions. So all the pressure is on you right now. How does that feel?
It feels great because Matt and I don't know each other that well, but I always come from a place of curiosity and inquiry, and I love asking questions. The challenge is, do I shut up long enough so that I can actually hear and process the answers? And I'm happy to ask some questions to get us going in this discussion. I would encourage our attendees, whether you use the Q&A or the chat, please let us know what's on your mind, if it's a comment, if it's a question. All questions are good questions because they're coming from you and they're genuine, and we assume people are asking because they are interested. And certainly if you're interested, someone else is interested who may not have enough courage to inquire. So please do. But until I get one of those, in some ways, Matt, as I listen to you about external shame and internal shame, can you talk a little bit about using I statements versus you statements?
Yeah, no, I can jump into that. Do you want me to? I
Right.
should probably let you finish out your.
Well, it's just, I think related to what you're talking about, or as I listen to it, related to it is so often we start with you when we should be starting with I. So for the person who's trying to shame me, rather than saying you're a terrible person and you're all this bad stuff, it really is I'm scared, I'm afraid,
Right.
I'm whatever. Just as with the internal shame, often we try to deflect. Well, you made me feel this way, or you did this to me, or you, where it's really I. And
Yeah.
so the more we can speak in I terms versus you terms, or let me ask, is it helpful to speak in I terms rather than you terms?
It's a great question. And the very short answer is it can be helpful. We have to be careful because to have attachment work in a relationship, one of the things that's actually important is that we don't have perfection either. We have understanding. And so, yes, if Stuart, if you and I have a conflict, which once again, conflict is not a negative thing. The conflict is an opportunity for you and I to connect. If you and I have a conflict and you say, and you start with I statements, that can help a lot because I'm able to hear, okay, Stuart is already owning his story. I'm scared. I'm frustrated. I'm hurt. I'm mad at Scott because he didn't provide me with the script I'm supposed to read, right? And then I'm like, oh, Stuart's having an issue here. Stuart's struggling. So there is no doubt that I statements can be helpful. We have to be careful. Sometimes if I encourage a couple and I say, hey, use I statements, it's really easy for a partner to be like, well, you're not using I statements, so I'm not having this conversation, right? And it's like, oh, good, we're going to use recovery as a weapon. And just because you aren't doing it right, I'm out, right? And that's not okay. So as a partner, if you aren't using I statements, I can often use I statements for you. So if you come to me, Stuart, and you say, you make me really mad and I can't believe you did this, I can stop and say, wow, it sounds like you're really hurt and that I've upset you. So I need to understand a little bit better what's going on for you. Help me understand why you're hurting, right? Like if you come at me in a place of pain, your ability to use I statements might be very limited. I can pick up on that and show up for you in a way that that can help draw out what's really going on for you so that you don't have to be perfect in the way you're saying it. But yes, I statements can be very helpful, but we don't want to get caught up in the idea that it's because I didn't say it right, we can't connect. Did that help at all?
Hopefully it helped our attendees. I thought it was a good way of framing it. So thank you, Matt. We have our first question. So thank you, brave person. Hello.
Come on, guys, jump on there. Give us some more questions.
Hello, I'm the SA. Been in recovery for 6 months. Have had a handful of relapses, but keep bouncing back. Married to a supportive husband of 8 years. Spouse continues to ask me to express vulnerability and courage and empathy. In your experience, what are some concrete examples of these? Although I'm working on sobriety, I'm eager to help my partner heal as well. Thanks.
Man, that is such a good question. A concrete example of vulnerability and courage and empathy. So a concrete example. So first of all, if you're struggling, if you are somebody who I think you said on there, you're somebody who struggling with addiction, empathy and vulnerability is not something most people struggling with an addiction are, I don't want to say, they're not trained well in doing. And so I want to actually kind of validate you for a moment and say, if it's hard for you, it should be hard, right? That's one reason why you probably picked up the addiction in the first place, is because vulnerability and empathy was difficult. As far as being vulnerable, you can start by being vulnerable just by saying, man, I'm feeling some temptations coming up. I'm feeling some triggers happening. I can feel myself getting pulled. Now, if you can honestly say, but I'm actually doing pretty good, and I've used these tools and I've been reaching out, and man, I'm excited to go to my meeting tonight because it'll probably help me, right? Like, that's an example of being vulnerable. I don't have to share with my spouse that I'm feeling some temptation, but it's not in the list of rules. It's not typically going to be a bottom line. As if I were to act out, I have to report that within 12 hours. But being vulnerable is typically where you are giving information that you don't have to give. And even better, it's information about what's going on inside of your heart and in your mind, some of the thoughts you're having. And so there are lots of ways. If you are, let's say you're still having, you said a handful of relapses, you keep bouncing back. I mean, that's courage. That's awesome. As far as vulnerability, you could also ask, like, what are examples of your spouse that your spouse is looking for? What type of vulnerability do they want? Now it could be kind of robotic. A lot of times when they ask us for vulnerability, we're kind of like trying to regurgitate the type of vulnerability that they want, right? But get an emotions chart, do a search for an emotions chart, track your emotions on a daily basis, talk about the different things throughout the day that bring up specific emotions. Oh, I was at work and one of my coworkers left to another company, and I was kind of disappointed. I really enjoyed that coworker. That's vulnerable. Share that. I saw a news story about this family and it made me sad. Or, I watched this video and it made me laugh. It brought me some joy, right? Like vulnerability is going to be found in emotions and in teaching the other person about your sense of self. And so as you work your recovery, you're going to be increasing your ability to recognize and understand your sense of self. So it should be getting easier over time to share those things. So I can jump into empathy, courage, and
Good. Can I ask on the vulnerability part?
yep.
I would be curious, is vulnerability code for disclosure? And what do you see as the relationship, if any, between vulnerability and disclosure?
That's a great question. I think it is important to ask our partner, like, what is it that they see as vulnerability? Because if they do see it as disclosure, there's no doubt disclosure is vulnerable. However, that would be vulnerable in the sense of I have a secret or I'm being silent about something and I'm not sharing it. So there is vulnerability there. However, disclosure as in I have information that you don't have, such as I remembered that I acted out 3 years ago and I didn't include it on my disclosure. Well, that's vulnerable, but that's not necessarily, even though it's scary and takes courage, there's other types of vulnerability. In fact, there's lots of other wonderful types of vulnerability. Disclosure is one very small piece of vulnerability, very important, but a very small piece of actually being vulnerable in a relationship.
It just clarifying for folks, both for the partner and the addict, that if the real issue is disclosure, then you need to work with someone about what disclosure means and what's a healthy way of proceeding, as opposed to using vulnerability as like a proxy for. I'm also curious if you could speak a moment about the first question, and then we've got some more, so we'll move on. But I'm eager to help my partner heal. And would you like to comment on the addict wanting the partner to heal, or the converse, or the opposite is the partner wants to help the addict heal?
No, and it's actually it's a wonderful statement, right? I love my partner, I want them to heal. Sometimes I'm eager to help my partner heal because their pain is driving me crazy. Their pain is too painful, right? And I think it's very vulnerable to say that I'm eager to help you heal because your pain is really painful for me and I don't like feeling pain. It could be helpful to say I'm eager to help you heal because I'm realizing how much I've harmed you. Now, I think we have to be careful on our eagerness to help somebody else heal, because I can be present for somebody. I can do my healing and I can be vulnerable, but I have to be careful that I can't make anybody else heal. I can't force anybody else to heal. I hate to stereotype here, but there's probably a lot of betrayed addicts that have spent much energy trying to help their partner heal, if you will. And so I love that phrase, and I would say I would be interested in your behavior that you are doing to help your partner heal. One of the most important things to help a partner heal, whether it's somebody who struggles with an addiction or not, is learn how to sit with them and their emotion. Learn how to not fix, but just be present with their emotion. That's hard to do. So I mean, shoot, we could fill a whole nother, I could talk forever on that concept.
I think that's
But
great, Matt.
is that good?
I think that's good. We've got some other questions. So if you want a concluding thought, and then we'll move on.
So I'm going to conclude because you asked about empathy. There is a very simple video on, you can search empathy versus sympathy or empathy, Brene Brown. If you search that on YouTube, Brene Brown, somebody created a little video of a bear and a fox. You'll see it. It's like 4 minutes long, 3 minutes long. And if you watch that, she goes through the 4 qualities of empathy. And I'll go through them real quick. Empathy is learning how to take the other person's perspective as their truth. I'm not going to try and change your truth. I'm just going to sit here and listen and understand your truth, and just be with you in it. Not going into judgment, staying out of judgment. So that's really important because, so perspective taking, staying out of judgment. I have judgments, but if I don't put my judgments on you, we're going to be in a much better place. My judgment is, like I talked about it in the beginning, my judgment is I'm never going to be good enough. Well, if I own my judgment, that's good. But if I don't own my judgment, I can't have empathy. I have this judgment in my head. It's preventing me from hearing you because I just want to get defensive and argue. The other qualities of empathy are recognizing the emotion of the other person. Well, if I'm not studying the emotions chart and getting a good idea of what all the possible emotions are, it's going to be hard for me to recognize it. If I'm not sticking around and having tough conversations, it's going to be hard for me to recognize emotion. And the last one is communicating the emotion. Well, communicating emotion takes a lot of practice. I see that you're feeling sad, and you know what? It hurts when I see that you're sad, and I'm so glad you're sharing it with me, right? I have to learn how to communicate emotion. So those 4 qualities and the way Brene explains the need for empathy is fantastic. So go watch that video. It's a great one. So hopefully that gives you some examples that you were looking for. And if you have another question, let us know. We'll just jump into some more.
Great. Thanks, Matt. Next question. Awesome topic and sadly relevant. My SAH has been sexually sober for 2 years and came clean about the addiction a year and a half ago. His recovery program has been erratic. He hasn't gone to 12-step groups in over a year and never got a sponsor, though he finally started therapy a few months ago. For the past 5 months, he's been on what looks like a relapse cycle. Not sexually acting out, but losing empathy, allowing himself to rage and nurse resentment at me, which he stopped for a year. Let's see. Oh, I guess continuing the next block. Okay, more recently, he's breaking all of my boundaries, defending actions like going for coffee with female friends or texting women he agreed not to and deleting the texts. He's doing much more gaslighting and blame shifting. So I have told him that I feel desperately unsafe and that he's not in good recovery. That made him so enraged and indignant that he feels like I'm not recognizing his successes. He's now projecting that I'm trying to shame him and saying he won't be receptive to my feedback. And he knows his recovery, and he knows, quote unquote, his recovery is going well, so he won't engage with me. Thoughts?
Oh gosh. Okay, where would I start here? Hold on.
Oh, I'm just moving them over to the
You are. So I'm now going over to the other tab so I can look at them. Okay, so thoughts. I have lots of thoughts here. So basically, I will say I'm not giving an out or making any excuses here, because it sounds like he does have some pretty unhealthy behavior if he's deleting texts. It is necessary for trust in a relationship to have transparency. There are no secrets in a healthy relationship. And and I could talk more about that if we need to, but basically there's transparency. So if I delete a text message, I would then go tell my spouse, hey, I deleted a text message. Here's what was going on. I needed to get rid of the temptation. And so, yeah, I totally deleted this text, but I wanted to make you aware of it, right? Like if that happened, that would be the conversation that I'm having. Even better, hey, I had these text messages. I'm actually worried about how this looks. I want to have a conversation about it. Same thing about going to coffee with friends. You said female friends. It's like, hey, I'd like to go have some coffee with this coworker or whatever. Like you would at least at a very minimum be having a conversation about it. This should not be secret. We should not be hiding behaviors like that. Now, I hear that you feel unsafe, and it makes sense why. You told him that he's not in good recovery. That would be like, what I hear you saying is, I feel unsafe and I'm scared of where your recovery is currently going, right? I'm scared if things keep going this way, that maybe justifications might be had and what this is going to do to our relationship, right? I don't want to lose you, right? Like it's that whole, I want to stay connected to you. I mean, the truth is, sometimes when we start therapy, which is what you made it sound like he finally was able to do, we can start to feel a little bit more empowered. We can start to feel a little bit more in control. And there's a part of that that's good. We want somebody to take control of their own recovery rather than doing their recovery for their partner. However, that doesn't mean you can decrease transparency. It doesn't mean that you can go back to old behaviors or even behaviors that are scary for your partner. You would at least need to have a conversation about it. I'm trying to think here if there's anything else you wanted me to comment on, because there's a lot of content there. But when we start doing recovery, that empowerment can create kind of some behavior that is going to feel very scary to a partner. I teach the people in recovery, I teach them all the time. Like you have to be afraid you have to behave in a way that is not afraid to hurt your spouse. And what I mean by that is not, hey, go hurt your spouse. It's if I need to go for a bike ride, and because I like biking, we've talked about this on here, but my wife's disappointed about it. I may say, hey, honestly, I'm going to go for a ride. I'm going to come back. I know it's disappointing to you, but I need to do this to take care of myself right now. And I'm going to be in a much better place when I return. And I need to occasionally let her be disappointed. Now, I'm not going to be rude. I'm not going to be mean. There might be times where I'm not going to take that bike ride, but I'm not going to live my recovery trying to figure out how to appease my spouse. I want to figure out how to nurture my spouse. I want to figure out how to be sensitive to my spouse and understand their needs, but I can't live my recovery trying to make them happy. Now, on the other end, I can't live my recovery thinking that I have no impact on them. I can't be rude. I can't tell them they shouldn't feel triggered. In fact, I need to be empathetic and lean in. Hey, talk to me about why this brings up emotional escalation for you. Talk to me about why this brings up pain. So I hope that helps. I don't know if I've answered all of your questions, but you wanted my thoughts. There's my random thoughts.
I would ask you in the middle one, there's the statement right in the middle. I don't know if I highlight something with my cursor, whether it shows up elsewhere.
I can't. No, I can't see it.
So there's the statement, so I have told him that I feel desperately unsafe and that he's not in good recovery.
Right. And I actually tried to comment on that earlier when I said we're better off trying to say, my judgment is you're not in good recovery, and that is scary to me because I don't want to lose you, right? He became indignant and enraged, not because you did anything wrong, right? An I statement there might have been helpful, or he might have gotten indignant and enraged regardless of how well you worried it. He might be indignant and enraged because you're calling him out and he doesn't want to look at the fact that he's in an unhealthy place. I don't know him. I don't know if he's in an unhealthy place or not. But you definitely let your concern be known. He took that as a personal attack that his recovery isn't in a good place. When what you were really trying to say is, it doesn't look like it to me. And because of that, I'm terrified. And I love you so much, I don't want to lose you, which is a beautiful thing to have told him. Again, we could try to phrase it a little bit better, but it may not change the way he responds.
So I assume the chat that just came up is from the questioner, who I suspect is having some feelings at the moment, Matt, that we might want to explore. The chat says individual therapy is his all caps only recovery activity.
Right. Yeah.
He is very invested lately in not appeasing me, but it's not in favor of recovery activities.
Right. No, and I that's what I was trying to highlight, right? Like, I think it's wonderful that he is engaging in some individual therapy. I mean, I often push that, okay, you've got to do individual therapy, you've got to do group therapy. 12-step is often incredibly helpful. I mean, we're looking at multiple avenues. I find it interesting that he had such a lengthy sobriety. You know, I would wonder, what recovery work was he doing then? It's hard because you throw out this idea that it's his only recovery. He's probably going to take that as an attack. You might even be right that it's his only recovery. If nothing else, it's in your opinion, it's in your judgment that it's his only recovery. And so I think I was trying to comment that, not that he was appeasing you, but a lot of times in recovery, a partner who is struggling with addiction will often appease, and that's not in the long run helpful. They'll try and do things. Okay, well, what do you want me to do? All right, I'll do those things so that you're happy, and that's not good. So we want the person struggling with an addiction to learn to vocalize their needs, but oftentimes in doing so, they are a little clumsy, or that's an understatement. They're often a lot clumsy in trying to vocalize their need and not as sensitive as they need to be. But it doesn't sound like, again, I realize I'm reading your version of the story. It doesn't sound like good recovery. It sounds scary.
So for this partner who clearly has strong feelings and is probably not only desperate, but sort of disempowered, or perhaps a little hopelessness, is there a strategy or a tactic that the partner can focus on for the partner from
and
a
it's
prodependent perspective?
Oh yeah, and so the hard part is, I can't say that any of us would love the response I'm about to give, right? The best thing any of us can do in that situation is to pour back into ourselves, to try and do our recovery work as best we know how, and then to try and show up and love our addicted partner as best we can, and to continue to be as vulnerable as we can, to let them know that we're scared, to let them know what our needs and wants are, and at the same time without telling them how to do their recovery. And that balance is not easy. But dictating their recovery, which I don't think you're doing, you might be, but dictating, well, you need to do this and you need to do that, doesn't typically work, because at best, they're gonna comply just to try and make you happy, which we don't want. But letting them know, hey, if you were to go to a 12-step meeting, that would bring me a lot of hope, because my hope is that you would start working the program. If you got a sponsor, that would bring me a lot of hope, because my hope is you'd have another voice, you'd have some extra support from somebody who knows how at least to do recovery in the way that they've learned it. We can share all that with our partner, and it's beautiful, but it's tough because sometimes you've got to just focus on your own recovery and try to pour into them as best you can. I don't know if that answers your question, Stuart.
It does. I don't know whether you talk about Al-Anon here or S-Anon or any of
Yeah.
the 12-step programs for partners
Oh,
or family
absolutely.
members, and maybe want to comment on that. And
Yeah,
how,
I mean, a lot of times a partner is in need of as much support as somebody struggling with an addiction. Unfortunately, when addiction comes into our relationship, it can consume all sorts of healthy things for both of us. And so it can be very healthy for a partner to also get individual therapy and be in some group therapy, do 12 steps. I've had some of my partners who actually have found a lot of help from adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. That can be a great 12 step for a partner, just to kind of understand, not to shame the partner at all. The partner hasn't done anything wrong. It wasn't their fault. They're in a relationship where there's an addiction present. But a lot of this can just be helpful places to find support. And if you find anybody shaming you in any of those programs, telling you that you're just as broken as the partner, that just isn't true. It's not healthy. You are doing everything you can to love your partner and help them along. And you don't deserve this. So definitely get all the support you can wherever you can.
great. Thanks, Matt. Um, Back to our first questioner. I enjoyed what you mentioned earlier about internal and external shame. I definitely have a number of negative core beliefs which lie beneath my shame. Kristen Neff's self-compassion book has helped. I'm regularly attending SAA meetings and I have a therapist. What other systems, methods, or resources may help me deconstruct my negative core beliefs? Thanks.
Awesome. Don't let me forget, we have a couple of people that mentioned things in the chat that I think would be really important to bring up, but let me
Okay,
dive into this.
I'll go to that next.
Yeah. So this is a really good question. People often say, and for any of us, whether we have addiction, whether we're a partner, whether we're just a regular human being, right? If somebody stumbled on this webinar on YouTube or randomly right now, all of us have faulty core beliefs. We have negative core beliefs that lie in our shame and are not helpful to us. They stop us from progressing. There are lots of ways for us to discover our faulty core beliefs that are not just therapy. I think therapy is phenomenal, has helped me do that a lot, but there's books I've read, there's people I've talked to that help me realize that my worldview is skewed by all of my beliefs and ideas, and everybody would do well to realize that they have core beliefs that may or may not be serving them well. And so Kristen Neff's self-compassion book is excellent. Attending SAA meetings and seeing your therapist is also great. Other systems or methods or resources. There's a lot of retreats. Even Seeking Integrity's intensive that is so much of the point, right? Going to the inpatient it's an amazing experience to learn your faulty core beliefs.
Yeah, I will put in a plug for Seeking Integrity, two websites to the extent folks, seekingintegrity.com, which has our residential treatment program and other paid programming. There are work groups now and support groups and various fee-based resources, and sexandrelationshiphealing.com, which has plenty of free resources, including things like what we're doing here. But I would also encourage blogs, podcasts, books, other webinars and drop-in groups. So there's lots of resources out there for someone eager to work a recovery. There's lots of resources provided us and other providers as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of really good resources. Now, one of my favorite books that in helping people understand their core beliefs is actually done by Troy Love. He wrote a book called Finding Peace. And I recommend this book to people usually a little bit further along in their recovery, where they realize that they have a lot of shame and core beliefs, and they're really wanting to understand what those are. His book does a phenomenal job, but it can stir up a lot of emotion, a lot of intensity. And so just make sure you're at a place in your recovery where you can handle kind of bringing up your past and what's brought all of that up for you. I'd actually talk to your therapist specifically and just see if you're at a place where working a book like Troy's, which again, I would recommend to anybody. He also has the Finding Peace retreat that he'll do. And I've attended those. It's a great resource. I mean, but there are honestly so many different things you can do, but I personally love that book and what it can offer. Listening to Brene Brown's library of books can often help us understand our faulty core beliefs. So lots of different resources, paid and free, are out there. So hopefully this helps you a little bit.
Thanks, Matt. In the comments, two different folks have commented about the Prodependence Anonymous meetings, which are starting. You can go to prodependenceanonymous.org, which is the website for the Prodependence Anonymous group. And I believe on that website there's a list of meetings. This is a relatively new concept that is being promoted.
Yep.
Anyone who's looking can go to that website or reach out to Seeking Integrity, and we can help direct you to try to find those resources.
Yeah, it's tough because sometimes the some of the 12 steps for partners, betrayed partners, will kind of promote the idea, that codependence idea of something's wrong with you, you're just as broken as the person struggling with addiction. And so, I mean, it would be great, those of us who believe in the Prodependence model, we would love one day if there are just as many Prodependence 12-step groups as there are any other group. And so right now they're doing some online, which is great. And but ultimately, if anybody wants to start a Prodependency 12-step for partners in your area, go for it. Let's get that rolling.
Great. Another in the chat, previous questioner, I spent 1.5 years being vulnerable and using I statements. I have a problem with the idea of being vulnerable when the relationship has become emotionally abusive again. And I get a lot of Prodependent, not S-Anon, group support and individuals therapy. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, this is why I guess I'm trying to say using I statements is helpful. And I mean, if your relationship has become emotionally abusive or gone back to being emotionally abusive, this is about you probably needing to figure out what are your needs. What are your, again, if you've listened to me on here before, and go back a couple of episodes ago, I think I've talked multiple times about boundaries and how boundaries in and of themselves are vulnerable, and they're based on needs that underlie them. And so the truth is, if you're in any relationship at all, if you have any boundaries, you are being vulnerable. Vulnerable doesn't necessarily mean you have to create an opportunity for the other person to hurt you. However, it's more along I have to create an opportunity for connection. And you can only do that as much as you are able, as much as you feel safe. And so unfortunately, if we're going to grow a relationship, we have to have some level of vulnerability, even if it's in the form of a boundary. So I don't blame you for getting to that place where you feel like you have to shut down and build a wall. And that makes me sad. I'm glad you're getting the support. I'm not sure that I have anything else to say other than that. But I don't even know that there was a question.
Yeah, I think um, a lot of frustration.
Oh, yeah. And
And
which is understandable.
yeah, I don't know, maybe we have a couple of minutes left. The difference between, perhaps commenting on the difference between being powerless over the disease of addiction and my life becoming unmanageable, a classic first step issue, whether you're the addict or Al-Anon, S-Anon, or any of the 12-step groups. And what are we powerless over? We're powerless over the disease of addiction. We are not powerless over the choices that we make for ourselves. And maybe one way of drawing to a conclusion, yeah, what are we powerful over? What are we powerless over? How do we know the difference? And how do we try to act upon in a healthy way?
Yeah. And what we are powerless over, we are powerless over outcomes. We are powerless over the behavior of somebody else. We are powerless over, the choice that somebody else can make or not make. What can we be powerful with? We can make a choice to stay in the relationship. We can make a choice to leave the relationship. We can make a choice to have a separation. We can make a choice of how vulnerable we're going to be. We have lots of choices, but every choice often has loss. If I'm going to choose this choice, I'm going to have loss by not choosing that choice and what its outcomes might have been. So powerlessness or being powerful is actually a bit of a tricky subject, because I tell people that they'll tell me all the time, I'm powerless. No, you are powerful and you are choosing to not act right now. That is your choice because you feel like that's the best one while you wait and see if there's any movement from your partner. Or you choose to stay in the relationship regardless of the behavior of your partner. That's your choice. And that's very powerful of you. But you might be telling yourself you're powerless. That would be a faulty core belief we need to work on. So I have no idea if that answered your question, Stuart.
Helpful to me, so thank you. Hopefully it's helpful to our attendees. One final question. I know the hour is drawing to a close, but let's do the one final question. My husband went into treatment for alcohol 5 years ago after I found out he had been acting out. At that time, we didn't realize he was an SA, nor did any of his therapists. Recently, I found out he has been acting out in a new way, which is no surprise since he didn't have treatment. I am prodependent in the most basic sense of the word. Although I felt like I was blasted in the face when he came clean, 2 weeks later, I'm not having big emotions, but rather jumped into helping him get help. He is deeply regretful and full of shame, and I'm going, I guess, through a normal grieving process. Oh, am I going through a normal grieving process, or am I setting myself up for an implosion?
Obviously there's no way for me to know really. If you are stuffing things down, if you're numbing, if you're isolating, if you're focusing only on helping him do recovery and not focusing on yourself, if you're not taking care of yourself in self-care ways, if you're not reaching out to friends, getting the support you need, if you're not doing your own therapy work or finding the help you need for yourself, then you're setting yourself up for an implosion. Based on what you've said here, it sounds like that, again, you aren't surprised he was acting out. It sounds like he came to you and disclosed. I think that sounds like a pretty normal grieving process, where you realize that, hey, the truth is he hasn't been getting the treatment he needs. And so, of course, he's going to act out in a new way. Hopefully, this motivates him to get the treatment he needs. Maybe it motivates you to get the treatment you need as well, because it would be normal to need treatment after being betrayed by somebody. So, again, from what you said, sounds like it's a pretty normal grieving process. All the other things I listed that help us in our own recovery, check those in and ask yourself if you're doing those. If you're doing those, I don't see why you'd be setting yourself up for an implosion. If you're not doing those and you're, like I said, isolating, not doing your own self-care, numbing yourself, then yeah, it sounds like an implosion is coming. But the fact that you're on here, watching the video, asking questions, sounds to me like you're probably heading in the right direction, but you're going to need to be the one that figures that out.
Great. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate the hour. Thank you to our attendees for being here. Just a reminder that the intent of this is to be support and psychoeducation and to try to be helpful. To the extent anyone does need professional help, we encourage you to go to a licensed mental health professional to get that help. I would also encourage you to go back to our resources, sexandrelationshiphealing.com and or seekingintegrity.com, or any of the other resources that Matt has talked about over in the chat. Matt will be back in 2 weeks. And I think Kim Buck is here next week. They alternate weeks, so I would encourage you.
Oh, is Kim back to doing it?
Kim, or are you doing it? It's on the schedule. Are you doing it every other week?
It's just I do it every other week, but Kim hasn't been for a while. But maybe she's back. That's awesome.
I don't think so. I don't know. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, check the schedule. But yeah, my plan is to be back here in 2 weeks.
Or don't check the schedule for next week because we may be having the wrong thing. So I apologize for the late start. It is helpful to me to do this. We have a handful of things we can do to make this just a little better experience. But hopefully the substance was good for everyone today. So with that, unless Matt, you have any final thoughts, we'll say thank you and see you in 2 weeks.
Yep, that's awesome. Thanks, Stuart. Good job, guys. We'll see you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.